Formal proceedings. Tonight's council meeting is being recorded. As you will be aware, anything said during the meeting will be in the public domain, and by taking part in this meeting, you consent to the use of your personal data for the purpose of this meeting and to it being recorded. Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Haywood. Item number 1 on the agenda. Do we have any priority business, Mr. Haywood?
Chairman, I can confirm there's no priority business this evening.
Thank you. Item number 2, minutes. The minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 6th of September 2022 are before you tonight on page 3 of the pack. Is it your wish that I confirm and sign the minutes of the council held on 6 September 2022? Thank you. Item 3. Are there any apologies, Mr. Haywood?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we've received apologies from councillors Robert Reid, David Williams, Lynn Hinley, Wendy Sutton and Kath Williams.
Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? Please show if so. I see no hands raised. Thank you very much. Item 5, questions under Council Procedure Rule 11.4. I pass to Mr. Haywood.
Chairman, I can confirm there are none this evening.
Whereby we move on to item number 6. The next item is to appoint Councillor Phil Davis as Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee for the remainder of the 2022-23 municipal year. Do we have a proposer?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Do we have a seconder? Thank you very much. Are there any questions in this matter? I see no hands raised. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Again, I see no hands raised. Is it your wish that the motion is carried? Those in favour, can I have a show of hands, please? Yeah, okay, thank you, everyone. Anyone against, please show. And do we have any abstentions? The motion is thereby carried. Which brings us to item 7 on your agenda. We now turn to page 5 to a report of the Cabinet Member for Welfare Services. Now, in the absence of Councillor Reid, can I call on the Leader of the Council, Councillor Lees, to present the report? Councillor Lees.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members and ladies and gentlemen. I propose that the Council approve the request for an additional budget of £69,797, an increase in establishment. As we all know, the cost of living pressures are impacting on our communities and is increasing the workload of our welfare services, and in particular the benefits processing and welfare support for our more vulnerable residents. This report sets out the need for an increase in the welfare services budget of £69,797 and the establishment of 2 additional benefit assessment officers due to the increasing workload because of the current cost of living pressures. Decisions regarding the changes to the staffing establishment are delegated to the Chief Executive, which within his budget. However, the requirements in this instance is an additional budget necessary to approve by Council. So please support this.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll happily second that.
Are there any questions? Hands raised. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Again, no one is showing. Is it your wish that the recommendation is carried? Those in favour, can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, thank you for that. Any against? And do we have any abstentions? None of the above. Thank you very much, members. The motion is carried. This brings us to item 8 on the agenda. We now turn to page 11 in your document pack, to the report of the Cabinet Member for Planning and Business Enterprise. Can I call, please, on Councillor Mason to present the report? Councillor Mason, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I actually move on to the recommendations that I'm proposing, I just want to ensure that everybody knows what today's motion actually means. We are recommending that you endorse the publication plan to go to public consultation and following consultation to be submitted to the Secretary of State. We are not asking you to approve the plan. When the consultation has been completed and the period of inspection has been completed, please be aware that the whole plan then still comes back to full council to be adopted. And that is not likely to be until late 23, early 24. The second point I want to make is regarding duty to cooperate. There's been a lot in the papers and in the press about the possibility of removing duty to cooperate. And indeed, we've received several letters recently from people saying we should pause the plan while we find out what duty to cooperate is going to become. We've also had people saying that we should contact the government to establish what the current position is. Well, if I said to you that over the past 2 months we've contacted the government on 7 occasions, the last of which in writing was on the 3rd of this month, where we were told that we were still under the obligation to carry on exactly as the law currently stated. We actually followed that up with a telephone call with that very department and officers from there, with our officers yesterday, and we were told exactly the same thing. On 7 occasions, we have been told exactly the same thing. It is our duty at the moment to follow the rules that are laid down currently. Having said that, if by some miracle our local MP manages to pressurise the government into actually coming up with something that removes the duty to cooperate or significantly reduces it, then I will be the first one to stick my hand up and suggest that we tear the whole thing up and start again. But at the moment, that is not what is on the table. Having said that, if you approve it going to public consultation today, then that consultation will run through, and it is unlikely that the document will be submitted to the inspector before late spring. At any point in time during there, if the rules on duty to cooperate change, other than to just become the exact same rules by a different name, which is a typical government tactic, then we can stop and look at it again then. If at any point in time during the inspection period, right up until the point in time we adopt it, the rules change, we can stop it then and we can withdraw it. The problem we have with all these suggestions that we pause the plan now is if we pause the plan now, then we almost certainly add a year on to the date that we are going to get anything approved and through. And doing that has several implications, and it's not the ones that I keep being challenged about, which is that the government is going to jump down on us like a ton of bricks. It's the fact that the developers are going to take an opportunity for the fact that we have not got a local plan and we are not in the process of actually drawing one up. And indeed, when I was chairman of the planning committee some years ago, we had a situation where we did have a local plan, but we didn't have the required 5-year housing land supply. And at that point in time, we had developers going straight through to appeal with the inspector, and our decisions to refuse planning permission were being overturned. That was when we had a plan and we didn't have a 5-year housing land supply. If we don't have a plan either, then I'm sorry, we are a sitting duck for any developer who wants to develop anywhere in our district. We don't have any ammunition. We don't have anything to protect the bits that we don't have in our current plan at the moment. Everybody's saying we're not listening. Well, there have been a number of changes as a result of the previous consultations, both in relation to sites and in relation to firming up policies relating to climate change and biodiversity throughout the district. If we don't keep moving forward with the plan, we lose those benefits that at the moment are giving extra protection when we move on to develop sites. This is the plan that we consider to be sound and that it should be published for consultation and subsequently submitted for inspection. Hoping that it has your support. And therefore, I am proposing that the council approves the recommendations on page 11 at item 2, which is that the publication plan Appendix A be subject to public consultation and following consultation be submitted to the Secretary of State. That the revised programme for preparing and submitting the local plan for examination set out in Appendix C be agreed. The strategic planning team manager, in consultation with the cabinet member for planning and business enterprise, has delegated authority prior to consultation to make any minor changes to the text format and appearance of the documents or the background documents in the interests of clarity and accuracy if considered necessary. That one is quite important because we've just picked up the fact that in Appendix C there is a typing error where it says that we're going to submit it in spring 2022 when it should be spring 2023 before any of you picks me up on that one. And the next point is that we propose the recommendation that the strategic planning team manager, in consultation with the cabinet member for planning and business enterprise, has delegated authority following regulation 19 consultation to submit the local plan to the Secretary of State for examination and propose minor modifications to the plan to the Secretary of State prior to submission, noting that any main modification changes arising from this consultation would necessitate a new Regulation 19 consultation. That is my proposal, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Thus proposed. Do we have a seconder?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I'd like to second that, and I reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Now then, I'm going to invite questions from the members. And just for the sake of clarity, I would like to say that a question would be potentially a single sentence with a question mark at the end of it. And in addition, you will be entitled, if you ask a question, to have a follow-up question. But according to the rules, that follow-up question must be pertinent and relate to the first question you've asked. I do hope that that's sufficiently clear. Thus, I will proceed to invite questions from the floor. Thank you. It would appear that there are no questions. That enables me to move on to invite a debate. Would anybody care to speak? Yeah, Councillor Cole, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really want to speak to reiterate what our cabinet member has had to say. Now, I've followed what's been going on with this. Now, the protests, the people that are there, I noticed some of them are saying build on brownfield first. The problem with South Staffs, 80% of our area is green belt. Most of the remainder is open countryside, and we've got very little brownfield land. I know that there's comparison being set against Dudley pulling out of the Black Country Consortium. But if you've read the Express and Star today, they say now their plans and some of the other Black Country authorities won't be ready until 2026. Now, I don't think we can wait and hang around for 3 years waiting to see what the numbers will come forward that we're having to look at from their plans. What has happened with Dudley is that they've got considerable brownfield. So they're looking at the brownfield, but they will still have to meet unmet need. We need to advance our plan. Now, the local plan, and to reiterate this, what normally happens if we haven't got a plan in place, and I'm talking now of needs for this authority, we need to build 5,000 houses for our own needs. Forget the 4,000 for the unmet need. We need to continue with that 5,000. And in order to do that, what will happen, my experience, and I've been on this council for 20 years, the development industry will come up and say, you haven't got a 5-year supply of land. That's laid down by the government saying we must have 5 years supply of housing. If we haven't got a plan in place, we can't provide that 5 years. And then what tends to happen is, I've got this happening in my area, I represent Featherstone. There's large plots of land that the developers have already spoken to farmers and said, right, we want to develop your land. Those land areas have not been put in this local plan. If the plan is thrown out, I know that those 2 areas of land will come back into being, and the developers will speculate and they'll put a planning application into us. That planning application is likely to be refused because it's greenbelt. However, it will then go to appeal, and then the planning inspector will say, because your authority's got no 5-year supply, we're going to grant that particular area. And that's the pressures we're under. I need to explain that to you folks because it's a complicated subject, but it's not as simple as every member in this authority wanted to sacrifice our greenbelt land. That's what we're tied down to. Indeed, looking at Lower Penn, you've got that's in the local plan for 390 houses, but there are other areas in Lower Penn that weren't considered. I know you were concerned about that because I've read your Facebook pages. But if you throw this plan out, those other areas that haven't gone into the local plan will be reconsidered. So just be careful for what we wish for. So I'm afraid because of what I'm saying there, I agree with the leader of the council and the cabinet member that if the duty to cooperate does change, we've still got that opportunity to revisit it. The elephant in the room is the contribution of the 4,000 to Black Country's unmet need. But we cannot stop our plan tonight, and I shall be voting for the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cope. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to surprise many in this room by starting off saying that actually I think this is a good local plan with some standout policies, but it is fundamentally flawed. So when this process started more than 4 years ago, there were 6 options or potential policy options presented, 2 of which scored the same on the sustainability appraisal, B and C. Option B was to meet our own needs and a modest contribution to the wider HMA, around 1,500 dwellings. And that was based on, and I quote from your own document at the time, maximum levels of growth which have proved realistic and deliverable in the last 22 years. Option C, which was the preferred option of this council, was to meet our own need and a minimum 4,000 dwelling contribution to the wider HMA. Now, where this council has failed its residents and this publication plan is flawed, was by instead of letting the subsequent local evidence determine the level of growth and contribution, as other authorities, it set the answer it wanted at the start of the process. Effectively, we started with an answer and wrote the formula to produce that answer. This undermines the whole evidence gathering process. At its conception, only one evidence base was used for that recommended option of a 4,000 dwelling contribution, the Greater Birmingham HMA study, a document which, as admitted, even in this publication plan on page 28, has proved to be inaccurate and is out of date. Since I've been on this council, and I, as well as others, have challenged this level of contribution, we've been told there is no other sound option. Well, I believe that is not the case, and that's now proven by Solihull. So this council objected to Solihull's approach, which was to see how much land they could and were willing to develop. Then they accounted for their own housing need before stating the surplus capacity of 2,000 dwellings will be contributed to the wider HMA. They did not base the fate of their green belt on a single piece of evidence at the start of the process. Instead, they applied a formula and got to a sensible answer. And despite our council officer's objections, the inspector has agreed with their approach and accepted the modest 2,000 contribution. So there are other approaches to unmet need. In the latest statement of common ground under South Staffordshire, it ends by saying, and I quote, "To date, we have not received direct objections to the 4,000 dwelling contribution figure from the Greater Birmingham and Black Country Housing Market Authorities, although some planning authorities have indicated they would not consider it appropriate to follow a similar methodology to determine their contribution to unmet needs." So that begs the question, why are we willingly applying a methodology that other authorities are on the record as saying is inappropriate? The latest threat members have faced has been a potential even bigger shortfall coming from Birmingham. And that is the same mistake this council made back in 2018 by thinking the shortfall has to be met in full as soon as it's identified. The housing shortfall is an ever-moving target. It does not stand still, and it is a fantasy to think it can be met in this manner. The predictions used in the studies are not tested and subject to many variables over time. Therefore, every time a study of this nature and scale is done, common sense tells us it will produce a shortfall. If we continue this approach of aiming to meet the full shortfall needs of the wider HMA on unproven figures and predictions, even when as stated in this document, they appear to have fallen significantly, then South Staffs won't have any greenbelt left for us to be custodians of. Therefore, whether it's a shortfall of 2,000 or 200,000 is irrelevant, as long as we have worked positively to meet our own needs with a modest contribution to the wider HMA. It's important to remind us all, as members, it is us elected representatives who are the decision makers, not officers and not developers. So I ask all members to think of our individual role as custodians of the Greenbelt and consider if developing large amounts of Greenbelt at this stage is truly being done as a last resort or simply as a tick box exercise based on one outdated study. The Black Country have gone back to reconsider their approach, and I do believe we should do the same. Let's take the time to revisit the just as sustainable option B, with its modest contribution to the wider HMA. I ask you to join me in rejecting this approach in its current form and send a clear instruction to senior members and planners that we want to be absolutely sure that we have proceeded with the right option for our communities before continuing any further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fisher. Does any other member wish to speak? I think Councillor Kinsey, your hand was first.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. A few thoughts from me this evening. First of all, when I was elected to this council in 2019, I knew nothing about planning. Councillor Fisher might feel the same. Like everybody else in my cohort at that time, we had to learn fast, and we did. we do have, as elected members, a duty to make difficult decisions. And for everybody in the public gallery, listening in from the committee rooms and even maybe watching online, it's an important lesson here. Very rarely do any of the decisions taken by this council boil down into very simple black or white answers. One thing we've learned, there is one hell of a grey area, and you have elected us to decide what is right within that. You're leaving us to make those decisions. That's democracy. I do want to just sort of pause ever so slightly and use a quote from an infamous source, but I think it's quite pertinent to what I'm saying here. And it goes, "At all events, the discussion of future grave but, with effort now, avoidable evils is the most unpopular and at the same time the most necessary occupation of the politician." End quote. I have spent the last 3.5 years doing exactly this, standing up for the importance, the value of getting on with exploring this plan, the options that will be put in front of us, and really understanding the detail. In that time, due to the nature of the discourse, there are friends that I fear I can no longer call friends. Last year, around about the time of the last public consultation, again, such was the discourse that an ordinarily young, fit and well young man actually feared for his physical health. Perhaps an actual literal manifestation of the term worried sick. So what I want to say on that is that I do not take this lightly. All of that is worthwhile to do this and get this right. I don't regret any of that. I have worked hard to constructively support this council to tackle the matter before us. It is not, and this is an important point for everybody listening today, desirable for South Staffordshire not to have no plan. We do need a plan. I am persuaded of the need to cooperate with our neighbours under the duty to cooperate. Clue is in the title. However, I still have grave concerns. So much has changed and continues to change. We have witnessed very recently the implosion of the Black Country Plan, and that should all give us pause for thought, if not a pause to the plan. I'd ask the questions, who are, we have this duty to cooperate. Who are we cooperating with now who cannot cooperate amongst themselves? Dudley and Walsall have obviously decided that they can go their own way and potentially seem like partners that we could work constructively with. Whereas the prior discussion with the Black Country Plan as was did seem to demonstrate that there was plenty of take and no give. And I think what really rankles for members and members of the public listening is the apparent need to make decisions that are potentially devastating and heartbreaking to our communities for the convenience of others. And we're referring to that extra requirement under the duty here, not necessarily our own numbers. The Billy Buns Lane site in Womburn, otherwise known as Smallbrook Farm, it is an active farm and people live on it, is the gateway to our village. It preserves our rural aesthetic and our identity. It is Greenbelt. It holds a deep cultural and historic significance to those I represent. And I must say, this is a sticking point for me. I do mean no offence to anybody listening in here by not referring to other sites. My time is limited. But taking a line from the proposals at Langley Road for circa 400 homes, 390, in a community that already barely has 400 homes as it is devastating. And people are naturally really worried about that, and so am I. But that line would, at some future date, I'm sure, raise the issue of boundaries and create a line of development that would stretch down from Lower Penn to Womben. We have seen this like before. Lower Penn has seen this like before. None of my residents, Lower Penn or Womben, ever wish to become a part of Wolverhampton. Sorry, Wendy. Specific sites within the plan as proposed will potentially, I'm concerned, devastate some of our communities. Other more appropriate sites, I believe, can, with the will, be found. So just to conclude, I will go back to my infamous muse for this evening with another short quote. Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. We must be mad, literally mad, end quote. Given the uncertainty, given the implications for our communities, particularly where some get and some don't, to allow this to press ahead at this time, I do fully understand and respect the hard work and tireless effort of the Cabinet and of our planners, everybody that works on this council and has worked on this plan. There is, as Councillor Fisher said, a lot of good in it. And I applaud their resolve to solve the problem of our future housing supply. But while there is a lot I can live with in the name of the greater good, I cannot do to the communities I've been elected to represent the potentially excessive and unnecessary harm I feel this plan as it currently stands potentially enacts. I therefore cannot support the proposal in front of us today, and in line with my fellow Womben colleagues would ask for a name vote. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Kinsey. I'm now going to call upon Councillor Janet Johnson to speak. Councillor Johnson, I think I'm going to have to impose a 5-minute limit. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, for calling me in. I wasn't going to stand up and say anything, but having listened to other people talking tonight, we are looking after South Staffordshire. The years I've been on this council, like Councillor Cope there, we've always looked after the interests of our residents and our green belts and everything else in South Staffordshire. Had they not built some houses in Great Worley many years ago, 60 years ago, I wouldn't have been living in South Staffordshire because we couldn't afford to live in Birmingham. So we came over here. And I think a decent plan is what we've got here, and I shall support the plan. Because at the end of the day, our young people are growing up. They will need places to live. And I'm sorry, if you've got a nice, idyllic place to live in, people want to be there, and you've got to provide for your younger people. We were at South Staffordshire Housing Association built a small area in the leaders area. And people there, I was lucky enough to be able to go along to when they opened the new houses and speak to people there. And they were people that actually lived in the area as children, but couldn't afford to buy houses back in that particular area. So South Staffordshire Housing Association built these houses. They built bungalows for a couple of bungalows for people with disabilities and young people. And the one young girl came up to me and she says, "Thank you ever so much for allowing this piece of land to be built on so that we can come back home," because people are actually living out of the district that want to be closer to home. It's all right saying this council's doing this and taking that out of this business. We're looking after South Staffordshire and making sure that South Staffordshire, Greenbelt and everything else is looked after. And that has been my plight from the time I started, and it was 1986. I've been here with a small, short area where I wasn't a district councillor. I've always been proud to stand up for South Staffordshire, and our staff our colleagues and everybody have worked really hard on this to make sure we get it right. It isn't actually set in stone at the moment. It's going out to consultation. And I think that's what people need to understand. If it goes out to consultation, if there's something you don't like, then you have to put it in writing and let us know about it. But this table, and we've been through this particular plan since 2018, when we started it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's an excellent plan for South Staffordshire, and it's something that we need to do. And both the chairman of the councillor sitting up there and Councillor Cox have both said it all, and they put it right, and so we all understand. So that's my opinion on this, and I really do think we do look after South Staffordshire and not the conurbation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I think Councillor Benton, you had your hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll start by saying I don't think there's a councillor in this chamber who has not at some stage been deeply worried about what we are proposing to do. I don't think anyone can say they have not. I am in a quandary, I'll be honest. I agree with what was said about the fact that if we don't put a plan in place and don't have the supply of land, we'll be in cowboy country. And there will be people moving into housing, to development, saying, well, you don't know what you're doing, so we're going to do it. And I'm worried about that. On the other hand, there are genuine, real fears, I use the word fear, amongst local residents that this is a step towards being engulfed by the conurbation. We all know the Boundary Commission is looking at South Staffs being separated, if you like, with Kings Winford coming to the bottom and Great Worley going over towards Stone. So again, that's the back of people's minds. From a green perspective, any development is not welcome, but I do welcome the moves we've made to limit that problem amongst the councillors. In view of the fact that I cannot see any alternative to what we're being presented with, and I take what Councillor Fisher said and Councillor Kinsey said, that, you know, can we go back and look at things? Can we do? I don't think we have time. Maybe we did the wrong turning at the start, I'm not sure, but I don't think we now have time. I am still to be convinced either way. I am leaning towards supporting the motion, but I still have great qualms. And I think anybody who's listening in the gallery should bear in mind that every councillor here does have those qualms. We are not trying to force something through. We feel we have our hands tied behind our backs, and we're in some ways acting on duress. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Can I now call upon Councillor Steele?
Thank you, Chairman. Just before I do say start, I promise not to mention Essington or the Bovis estate even once, although I've just done it. I accept. I do accept, but I will not mention it again. We keep hearing about the duty to cooperate as the reason for having to give up large parts of our green belt for the needs of the Black Country and Birmingham. So let's be absolutely clear on this. The government haven't said that we need to contribute 4,000 dwellings to the wider HMA. That's a decision that's been an internal decision of this council, officers and members, taken in 2018. We are told that we don't have a choice. We have all had emails over the last couple of days pressurising members to accept this approach this evening. I'm not going to go into detail, but my colleague referenced Solihull's plan. Back in May last year, we agreed a statement of common ground with them, and in that it states, South Staffs Council acknowledge the position set out by Solihull, but do not agree with the approach proposed. And it goes on to say, South Staffs Council consider that deferring the strategic issue of unmet needs is a significant soundness issue for Solihull's local plan review. It then finishes with South Staffs Council do not agree that the Solihull local plan review can be considered sound without effectively addressing this matter. Well, we now know what the inspectorate's view of Solihull's plan was, and it's published on Solihull's website in September this year, and it says, the inspectors have agreed that the council's identified housing requirements are appropriate and have accepted the council's approach to support the unmet housing needs from the wider housing market area. And in doing so, it means that the council has passed the planning test known as the duty to cooperate with neighbouring councils. So despite now having egg on our faces, this just shows that there are other options. This council thought their approach to contribute a modest 2,000 dwellings would make our plan unsound. But as we see in Solihull's case, that has now been proven to not be the case. So before we rush into sticking with this publication plan that has been stuck in the same lane since 2018 with very little change, let's take some time to reconsider, as Dudley and the Black Country are. Our own housing need will continue to rise, as will the wider HMA. So in the next plan, we will again have to release yet more green belt for our own needs, let alone any further unmet need from Birmingham and the Black Country. Therefore, we should not be so quick to develop our own green spaces for others at this stage. So reluctantly, I can't support this approach, and therefore, in its present form, I will have to be voting against this plan.
Thank you, Councillor Steele, for your contribution. Councillor Penny-Allen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to support the local plan. The reasons for that are very simple. We live in a new village, 4,500 homes with 11,000 people. This village is not very old, and already our young people cannot afford to live in our village, can barely afford to rent in our village. As part of our new housing development, we are getting some affordable homes. We have already been told by the Housing Development Officer they're 4 times oversubscribed. The reason for that is very simple. The rents are rising so rapidly that young families are being squeezed out of our village. We have got an increasing number of people who are really struggling with their mortgages, their rents, their cost of living, and they are looking for a cheaper place to live. I think from my point of view, when we were first elected, we did not know that the I-54 was going to be as large as it is in that future plan. We did not know that the West Midlands interchange was going to arrive. And we did not know that people would find the cost of travelling to their work as high as it is now. We are going to need, I believe, more housing for ourselves in our own communities than we have envisaged in the past. And if inflation continues to rise and the numbers of houses that we need continue to rise for our own communities, I think we have to serve them. I have heard what has been said about other authorities. Some of the things I could say to you about Walsall Authority from inside knowledge are not bearable in this arena. However, I would say to you that there has been logic in what we've decided to plan. There has been consideration in what we've decided to plan. And I do believe that we have intended endless workshops in order to help us to arrive at a decision that is logical. I do understand that some people may have some very strong reservations this evening. I'm speaking to you from the youngest community that you have in South Staffordshire. And we have chosen as a parish council to work cooperatively with our developers. And that has led to benefits for our community. And I am very pleased that the council, this council, has decided that we will soon be at the limits of what we can currently do within our current infrastructure. I think we have considered every aspect, and Dan is quite right. There isn't anybody here who's comfortable about this. No one is. However, as the newest and largest community, and having as a parish council work cooperatively to obtain community benefit from our developments, and foreseeing the future need for our own residents, never mind Birmingham's, and understanding the rate of social deprivation and the rate of social unease, which has been caused by so many families splitting and the various social factors that are influencing our need for housing. I do understand why we are moving forward with this, and we are moving forward to public consultation. We are not moving immediately to submitting this plan. It's very important that everybody here understands that we are moving to public consultation and not straight to decision making. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Allen. And
Point of order, Chairman. Point of order, I've heard it mentioned twice now about the consultation. That is just a consultation, not proceeding to submission. Can the Cabinet member please clarify that as part of accepting his vote tonight is then straight away after consultation going forward to submission?
Councillor Mason, would you kindly? Thank you.
The proposal, as I clearly laid out, is that the document will go for Regulation 19 consultation, and at the end of that consultation, probably in late spring, will go for inspection. That does not mean approval. Approval will come at the end of the inspection process when the inspector has given all his opinions and they've been taken on board, and everybody's views and concerns have been taken on board by the inspector. And at that point in time, the whole thing will come back to council for approval. I hope that clarifies it, because I tried to do that in the first place.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Merrick, please.
It isn't very often that I have to stand up and talk to you. And I won't waver from my decision. I listened to Councillor Fisher, magnificent talker. Listen to Dan Kinsey, wonderful person, wonderful. From my heart, I will not waver from my people who have voted for me to be here from Womben. And I will not support this document.
Thank you, Councillor Merrick. Would anybody else wish to speak? Please do. Thank you. Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. One are national rules and guidance and practices involving planning and development everywhere in the country. For a very long time now, these rules have been tilted, and the balance, unfortunately, is in favour of the developer, not the local planning authority, not the local people that live in that planning authority area, but the developer. Now, a development plan Every planning authority has to make a development plan. That development plan, our development plan, is created to defend our communities and our land from developers. And that's what this development plan does. If you read the 1,100 pages that are contained within the development plan, a majority of it focuses on environment, houses, schools, roads, infrastructure, all of which have to be put in place when there is development taking place at a certain level within this area. So I don't want to be left without a development plan, because I've been there before. And as Councillor Terry Mason said right at the very beginning, if you don't have a development plan and you don't have a 5-year land supply, it's open house for the developers. At least with a development plan, we can defend our position. Without it, we're unable to. And if you look around South Staffordshire, there are very, very good examples. I'm not going to name them, but there are very, very good examples of where development took place back in the 50s, 60s and 70s. It was developed when we hadn't got a plan. If you look at this plan, it guarantees now good quality homes. It guarantees areas for children to play. It guarantees areas where people work, etc., etc. I've been on the planning committee now for about 6 years. And believe me, we are a planning authority. We can't say yes or no to a developer unless we have very, very good reasons. And this development plan will give us those very, very good reasons to say no. We won't win everyone, but we'll be able to hold our corner and win the most of what I think is right for the people of South Staffordshire. For the last 12 months, I've been chairman of the planning committee, and it really does amaze me at the arrogance of developers who come along with a plan. I want to do this, I want to do that in that area, and then just bang a planning permission in and expect it to be passed through. We'll be in that position if we haven't got a development plan. We will lose the right to defend our land and our communities. So I'm going to support this development plan because I think in 1,000 pages, you're not going to get every page that everybody will agree with. And yes, there are people there that have got different points of view and different opinions about the wrongs and rights of figures and numbers, etc. They may be right, they may be wrong. I don't know. What I do know is that the government nationally have said, we've got to build in this country 300,000 homes a year. Mr. Gove, who was recently appointed as the Minister to provide those houses, has said, yes, I'm going to drive through this policy of 300,000 houses per year. We've got to provide a proportion of that. And I think the numbers that have been created by 4 years of work by the officers within this authority are fair numbers to meet our share of the national figure of 300,000 homes a year. They're not going to turn, the government are not going to turn around and say, forget the duty to cooperate, do what you want. If you don't want to build houses in your area, carry on. Which area is going to take that responsibility on? Nobody will. So they will not remove the duty to cooperate. They'll just call it a different name and we'll still be left with a responsibility to provide additional houses above our own needs. And nobody's going to say in national government, we haven't got to build 300,000 houses. Because there is a huge demand for houses across this country. We've heard in Purton, there's demand there that can't be met because house prices have gone up and young families can't live in that community. They have to leave where they were born and brought up and move elsewhere. And that happens all over the country. So it has failings. It probably has some inaccuracies. But at the end of the day, I believe it's a good plan. It's a plan that will serve this community, this planning authority, this local authority well going forward in the future. So I ask everybody here to support the plan, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lawrence. I think Councillor.
I've listened very closely to what people have been saying tonight, and I do agree with quite a lot of what people are saying. I listened to Councillor Johnson and about the need for houses and the place that I live in now. I've lived there for over 40 years, and that was Greenbelt land once upon a time. I do get people say to me, why is it that our young people have to move away from Wombourne? Because the house prices are so expensive, and they have to move away, and hopefully at some point in the future they might move back. But I also get people from places like Treacle that I know phone me up and say, when the preferred options document was published, why is there no house building in Treacle? Why haven't we got some small developments with bungalows for elderly people that want to sell up their big house and stay in the village? Why haven't we got some affordable houses for our younger people to stay around in villages like Treacle? I listened to Councillor Cope, and he's very right that there are developers with options on land. I know that round Wombourne, virtually every piece of ground has got an option on it, and it's had an option for more than 5 years. I know that. It's not speculation. I know that because developers have offered us as parish council land on short-term or medium-term leases when other developers have not been able to meet their obligations to provide us with things like allotments or leisure spaces. However, can I say that listening into all that, the plan does take some account of this, but in my view, it is not, in terms of Wombourne in particular, the pieces of land that have been identified are not in the right place. Councillor Kinsey talked about the village and the approach to the village, what is now being called Billy Bunn's Lane as a development site. Let's be honest, it's not one site, it's actually 4 individual sites. That is a very critical part of the village. It's very dear to the people of Wombourne. And when our planners have looked at the impact of various sites in sustainability and impact on Greenbelt, etc., there's one thing that they have missed out. In our plan, we talk about the uniqueness of our villages. We talk about the preserving and trying to conserve the nature of our villages. This piece of land that is called Billy Bunn's is integral to the character of Wombourne village. And if that land goes, it will destroy that totally. What their planners don't take account of is the well-being factor. We hear a lot about well-being now. People in Wombourne take a lot of well-being, improving their well-being through when you come back from work, as I've said many times, when I've been coming back from work, down from Sedgley or from London, wherever, and I come down that hill from Sedgley and I come across the Woodhouse roundabout and I see those green fields, I see Phil Lander's farm with his hay bales there, and I see the church steeple in the background. That is very comforting, and that's what people of Wombourne actually like about coming to Wombourne. Yeah, you pass through the village and then you get into the sprawl, the southeastern sprawl, where there's hundreds, if not thousands of houses have been built. But I certainly would like to see that part conserved. Our planners say that they've chosen that site because it has low impact on the green belt. Let's face it, it is the green belt. It's taking out the green belt, so no wonder there's low impact on it. We wanted to talk to our planners about alternative sites in Wombourne. There are alternative sites. Forget about the Copart site. We've been told we can't have that. But there are other sites that have been put up on the south and southeastern side of Wombourne that will meet the criteria for sustainability. There are sites, recently we've had the Himley Meadows site developed. There are sites very close to there that meet the criteria for sustainability. Perhaps not as strong as one that you get a plant in the middle of the village, but certainly they meet the criteria. We've got a satellite centre of the village around Blakely area where we've got shops, we've got a post office, we've got communities, we've got 2 community halls that people can use. The schools are no further away from the possible sites than the Himley Meadows site. We've got a supermarket down the road from these sites, Sainsbury's supermarket. Further on from that, we've not very much further on, we've got a Lidl being built by this council, with a mini retail park attached to it. So there's lots of sustainability there. We haven't been given the opportunity to discuss this, and this is one of the things that we are very aggrieved about. We're supposed to be member-led. We got this plan with no talking. There's been no discussion through the summer about this. We've been told about confidentiality, about the sites, commercial confidentiality. We don't want the developers to know where we're going because they'll be in there, as I said earlier. They're already in there. They've been there for years. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Red Row, looking at the submission they put in for the call for sites, if Red Row hadn't got options all the way down Radford Lane and round Poole Hall, you know, they put a superb presentation up. So I am going to be voting against this purely to try to get a poll. Some alternatives. I'm not talking about reducing the number of houses in one, but if we have to accept them, we will accept them. We've already got the what do they call it? Not the reserved land. The land that was identified in the 2018 SAD, the safeguarded land, and we've got the land in Orton Lane. Again, the safeguarded land on Poole House Road, they're calling one site. That's 4 different sites. So we accept that we've got to take some houses, but let's make sure the houses are in the right place where they do the least amount of damage to the traditional centre of Wombourne Village. We've got a conservation area. We're talking about building right up to the edge of that conservation area, taking out our green fields there. The other aspect, as Councillor Benton commented on, is the coalescence. I am very, very concerned about the coalescence of the sites in Wombourne and Lower Penn. The Lower Penn site is going to be dead reliant on facilities, services from Wolverhampton. And if the sites go ahead on the Billy Bunn side of Wombourne, then
Councillor Bond, forgive me for interrupting you. You're well over your 5 minutes.
I'm just going to write
another half
minute. I could just wind up with
okay,
2 sentences.
Thank you.
Okay. The aspect of coalescence that I am most concerned about is if you think about it from north of Wolverhampton, from the M54 along the A449, there is continuous development right the way through Wolverhampton, south of Wolverhampton, across Lloyd Hill, Spring Hill, right down the Stourbridge Road. If these sites go ahead, there will be more building on there and that continuous line of development. And so Wombourne and Lower Penn and Spring Hill will look like an appendage to Wolverhampton. So I will definitely be voting against this. And I would say to members, think hard about this. I think we're being misled about this consultation phase. It is not the consultation that we're being led to believe it is. And if a decision that's made tonight is going to be a permanent decision and it's forever, it's not a game. You can't put the stuff back in the box and try again. If you make the decision tonight, it's a permanent decision and you will be destroying parts of our South Staffordshire forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Michel.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the debate tonight. The point about the duty of cooperation, our 2 members from Essington seem at odds with the views of our officers and legal team. But I'm to much else to support their view, and I think it'd be dangerous to rely on it being cancelled in the future. It isn't at the moment. The other part of the argument seems to be about a site in Womburn. I feel very much we're here tonight to protect South Staffordshire. If we all, and let's face it, it's a compromise, and finding all these sites in South Staffordshire, there's very few of them that we're pleased about. It's the downside. We need the houses. More importantly, we need to have a plan in place. We need to satisfy everything, not for the benefit of people in the conurbation, but so we've got a plan in place so we can have our destiny in our own hands. I think if we start acting because we've got pressure at home, that there are a lot of areas which I think, you know, Bilbrook, I think, has taken disproportionate share. But we've got to make a decision today with our South Staffordshire heads on to protect South Staffordshire, because the idea of risking going into uncharted territory without a plan is that we might not have a housing supply, but it's terrifying. And to put South Staffordshire in jeopardy because we can't cooperate, I think would be unforgivable. And I think this is our best chance to agree on a plan which has been well thought through. And if we don't take that opportunity, the chances of us renegotiating it, you know, do some members think we're going to come back? Oh yes, well, we'll give you this and we'll take all that out, and Pattern will put the hands up and say we'll take that. It's not going to happen. We may not like some of the things in it, but I don't think we've got an option, and I feel we've got to go ahead with this plan. It's the only sensible option. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michel. Councillor Sadler, I have your name on my list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I hate this plan. To my mind, it's been mishandled from the beginning. I do not like the strategic sites. I do not like the fact that certain areas are taking disproportionate amounts of the development. I don't like the fact that Bilbrook will actually run into Pendigard, will be vulnerable to takeover. We know Wolverhampton want to take bits of our area. We've seen it before. We've seen it around Castlecroft, where we've actually got a ridiculous situation that there's a Staffordshire school completely within Wolverhampton because they got the land. There's one field left if the Billy Bunn site is built on, the field on Withymoor Lane, between us and a continuous ribbon of development. We know Wolverhampton would love to take South Staff areas because we pay the council tax. That's all they will see us as, cash cows. However, vile though I think this plan is, I can see no alternative but to go ahead with it. I'm sorry, I wish I could, but the risks of not having a plan to me outweigh all the defects of the plan proposed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Sadler. Councillor Davis, I think you raised your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened to the arguments and the debate, and I've listened to some very good debates. And I know Councillor Bond and Councillor Kinsey, have put over our position very clearly in Wombourne. And I am going to be very parochial because I'm only talking about Wombourne. I've agonised over this plan for quite a long time now. But when I make a decision, I want a degree of certainty against risk. And at this moment in time, I don't actually see that balance. The plan doesn't appear to me to nail down enough corners on the tablecloth, if you like, and therefore it gives me, some real problems, especially when I think about, duty to, to sort of cooperate now seems to be an option, not rather than a necessity. I think I agree both with my colleagues that the land separation between the A449 and the village is crucial to us. And that, to me, is just one step too far. Again, I'm talking parochially. I'm not talking about the whole plan, because I don't think I'm in a position to talk about other people's areas. I guess what you're asking me to do is take a leap of faith. And I don't think I can take that leap of faith based upon the information I've got before me. And sometimes, no plan is better than a bad plan, and I will not be supporting it.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak before I call for the summing up and winding up? I don't see any hands. That being the case, I will invite Councillor Mason to wind up, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I could take exception with quite a few of the things that have been said by various people. I'm aware of the Womben situation, but unfortunately, I've only been aware of it for about 6 weeks. Had I been aware of it before, maybe we could have gone somewhere. But having said that, surely if you believe that one particular site is not sound, then surely the Regulation 19 consultation for soundness is the ideal time to put up an alternative site to the inspector and argue why you're not against the development, but you are against that particular site and the grounds of coalescence are part of it. But as I say, until literally 6 weeks ago, I'd never heard that argument before. As regards Councillor Fisher's comment about us ostensibly seeming to pluck 4,000 out of the sky as opposed to 1,500 that may have been there earlier, I'd like to say that the actual duty to cooperate numbers have been opposed by roughly 75% of the people who have responded. Unfortunately, the majority of the 75% who've opposed it are from the development industry, and they think we should be talking about not 4, but 7, 10, 12, 15, all their own different methodologies to get it. So over a period from now until 2039, compared to a national requirement of 300,000 houses per year, I think ours is relatively modest when you take it across the whole district. As regards the point of why aren't Solihull doing any more, in fact, if you actually go back and look at the report in more detail, you'll find that the inspector has actually imposed an additional 1,700 houses on Solihull, on top of the 7,800 they've already got proposed for their green belt, which is more than ours. So, as I say, we could go on ad infinitum trying to dispute one thing or another and going backwards and forwards, but we've had approximately 40 member sessions since the date this started. We've had 3 or 4 consultations since the date this started. The local plan is not going to suit everybody. It is never, ever going to satisfy everybody's requirements. What we have tried to do is to put something that is practical and workable and safeguards the district overall. And therefore, I am afraid I return to the comment that I made before. I am proposing that the council approves the recommendations that are at items 2.1 to 2.4, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. It has been suggested to me that I should invite an initial vote on whether you would like to have a named vote in this matter. That has to be done. A show of hands for those who would like, please, a named vote. That
All about the name vote as well.
not sure why I'm hearing other voices.
We're here.
I really don't know. Yeah, okay, we'll carry on as is. That means indeed I must now turn to Mrs. Fox to conduct the named vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman. So you're asking now for a named vote in respect of all of the recommendations taken together. So I will ask you in turn whether you're voting for, against or abstaining. So firstly, Councillor Adams.
For.
Sorry, Councillor Adams. Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Barrow. Councillor Bates.
For.
Councillor Benton. Councillor Bolton. Councillor Bond. Councillor Bourke. Councillor Boyle.
For.
Councillor Burnett. Councillor Kane. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Cope. Councillor Cox. Councillor Mike Davis. Councillor Phil Davis. Councillor Evans. Councillor Ewart.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
Against.
Councillor Heseltine. Councillor Hollis. Councillor Holmes. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Johnson. Councillor Kinsey. Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Lees. Councillor Lockley. Councillor Mason. Councillor Merrick. Councillor Michelle. Councillor Kath Perry. Councillor Ray Perry. Councillor Christine Raven. Councillor John Raven. Councillor Sadler. Councillor Sisley. Councillor Steele. Councillor Upton. Councillor Bernard Williams. Councillor Henry Williams. And Councillor Wilson. Thank you.
Excuse me, could we have a piece of quiet, please? I have a feeling that Councillor Kane was beckoning in order to speak. I have to say to you, Councillor Kane, unless you're raising a point of order, At this stage in the proceedings, I can't permit you to speak. I have to refer that to the appropriate officer. If I'm not sure I understand the question entirely, I was hoping somebody else might.
I think Councillor Kane, we can clarify that for you outside of the meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, in that case, members, I have the result of the vote. For the motion 30, against 12. The motion is thereby carried. And just before I conclude the business of this evening, I would like to thank all of the members contributed to the debate. It's a considerable list of you who did indeed stand up to be counted, so to say. And that was an admirable effort on everybody's part. Thank you so very much for that. And I can now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.